A decade ago, Rocksteady dropped the final game of their iconic Batman Arkham trilogy, the fourth game in the series that reinvented what a AAA superhero game could be. On the Marvel side, things hadn't been drier. It was just years of average MCU movie tie-ins, the odd bright spot of a Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, but on the flip side, whatever the hell the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game was. Point is, whilst Marvel games were stumbling through rushed development cycles and rubbish tie-in games, DC had cracked the code of what fans wanted from a superhero game, giving us one of the all-time Batman interpretations. Fast forward to now then, and talk about the old switcheroo, Marvel games has become one of the most well-organised function entities in video games period, and for DC, it's like a competition of can we make worse movies or video games and see who shits the bed faster. Look, I'm not here to start some tribal comic book war. I love both, and I want both brands to succeed. The MCU, the DCU, Marvel games, DC games, I want them all to be really successful. But what the fuck, WB? How did you allow this to happen? You had the blueprint, and not only have you been overtaken by Marvel, you've gone backwards, you've regressed. So, that's what I want to talk about. How Marvel is thriving and DC is diving. But before I do, as always, if comic book games are your shit, news, reviews, guides, streams, the full shebang, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you around. So the biggest flex that Marvel has right now is you look at the lineup and it is just a sheer variety of IP. You look over at DC and it's like, you got any superheroes? And they're like, well, we got Batman. If we take out both Telltale and Lego games, I want to read out the list of games from Marvel and DC since the release of Arkham Knight in 2015. On the Marvel side of things, we have Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Spider-Man 2018, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Marvel's Avengers, Ultimate Alliance 3, Guardians of the Galaxy, Iron Man VR, Marvel Midnight Suns, Spider-Man 2, and Marvel Rivals. On the DC side of things, Injustice 2, Gotham Knights, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and Batman Arkham Shadow. That is 10 Marvel games compared to DC's 4. Now, truthfully, I'm always a quality over quantity guy. Even that doesn't apply here. It's true that yes, Insomniac Games' output is illegal, mate. How fucking efficient they are is just mental. And yeah, not every Marvel game there is a banger, but it's the sheer variety in what their offerings are. Marvel's Midnight Suns and Guardians of the Galaxy both undersold and were below expectations, which is a travesty, because they are two truly excellent games, I believe. Guardians of the Galaxy has some of the best writing that I've ever seen in a video game, a really great Guardians of the Galaxy story too. Marvel's Midnight Suns has truly top tier, excellent combat that even me was a bit of a skeptic of going into it. If we ignore kind of the Persona elements that were around it, with everything that happened in the Abbey, I know it worked for some people, it didn't particularly work for me, but they're two excellent games that just didn't perform what they probably needed to get a sequel. DC though, I mean, sure, there's variety here, a looter shooter, a looter co-op brawler I guess, a fighting game, and a truly excellent VR game. If you'd have said to me that in the next decade after Arkham Knight, the best DC game that you're going to experience is a Batman VR game, I'd have asked whatever it is you're having and I would have want some, because what the hell, man. And that's not to take away from how good of a job Camouflage did with Arkham Shadows, because that was a truly excellent game, but it's the fact that despite enjoying elements of both Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad, they both just didn't hit, when both really should have. A Bat Family game with a Court of Owls story, it should go off. But it was such a dull story, and it didn't really even act as a Bat Family game, more of just a Robin or a Nightwing game, and it regressed from its free flow combat that its predecessor had. Suicide Squad, sure, we all wanted to be the Justice League, but to finally see them and get such a disappointing story throughout its main campaign and its live service offerings was pretty unexpected. But it's not really just these games here in this period that is disappointing from a DC point of view. It's the future. I am looking at Marvel games right now and its offerings, both current and in the future, and it's so vast. We've just had the release of a PvP hero shooter, which is doing absolutely insane numbers, and is probably going to be the first big live service superhero game to perform well. On top of that, it's the variety of characters in the offerings. This year is due to have a Black Panther and Captain America game set in 1943, helmed by video game industry icon Amy Hennig. Looking further ahead, EA Motive's Iron Man game, Cliffhanger's Black Panther, Arcane's Blade, Insomniac's Spider-Man 3, and Insomniac's Wolverine. 6 games offering such unique characters and just total packages. I look over at DC, and all that we know about is Wonder Woman. We have no idea when to even expect an update on that, let alone release it. Look, video games, they're complicated, man, I get it. For any game to release is basically a miracle. But what I'm talking about here is the well-oiled machine that Marvel Games is, and the colossal fuck knows what of what is happening at WB and DC. Whilst Marvel Games have been a step ahead, and rather than forming their own studios, they've gone, you know what, let's just pair our IP with a studio that makes sense. Unique, fast traversal. Spider-Man, okay? Insomniac. An immersive vampire killer, okay? Arcane, Blade. A strategy game, Firaxis. It all just makes sense. DC are like, well, let's just task the same 2 to 3 studios to work on Batman adjacent IP and churn out 3 games every decade. Look, the DC EU did no favours in popularising these DC heroes, but as someone who grew up on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, I'm looking at these characters screaming to the heavens, why are we not utilising them? Green Lantern, any of the Lanterns, Hal, John, Guy, I don't care. The Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, it looks like we're going to get a Wonder Woman game, but these characters, they deserve video games and they lend themselves so well to video games. And they're not just individual superheroes, but groups too. I mean, the Teen Titans. I don't know what it is that gets WB so rock solid about Suicide Squad, but for me, the 4th pillar of DC has always been the Teen Titans behind Batman, Superman and Wonder Woman. I do have my suspicions that maybe WB Montreal's next game after Gotham Knights is a Teen Titans game. It makes sense to kind of build on the foundations there, but I don't know why the Teen Titans just haven't been explored wider in the DC universe. 2003 show was a banger. The Robin in that show was on something, I don't know what it was, but he was jacked up. There is the idea that WB got it wrong chasing live service style games, with elements in Gotham Knights having it, but mainly in Suicide Squad. I don't think they got it wrong, it's that they got the studios wrong. Marvel learnt this the hard way. The campaign of Marvel's Avengers was pretty great with Kamala. The live service of Marvel's Avengers, pretty awful, despite the potential. This time they've gone with NetEase and a studio that actually makes sense making a live service game. Crystal Dynamics can make a great single player game, but they were always ill-equipped for a live service Avengers. The same applies to DC. I've got no problem with them wanting a live service looter shooter, wanting another DC Universe Online, a DC Rivals, but it's about who's making it. Rocksteady were the kings of the AAA superhero genre, and you had them making a game they had no experience in making. When I did my final Suicide Squad review, I compared it as having Michelin chefs who'd worked in a steakhouse their entire life, all of a sudden be making family Italian dishes. It makes more sense in that review, but stick with me here. Whenever Suicide Squad was allowed to be this more cinematic solo experience, it was fantastic, but the overall game had about 2 or 3 of those. There is some good news in that in the last financial call or sometime in 2024, they did say that they're looking at licensing out their IP more, WB as a whole that is. The worrying thing for me is that they doubled down even in there about Batman. Look, my favourite superhero is Batman. The Batman Arkham franchise is my favourite franchise in video games. But for the love of God, give me other DC heroes please in a video game. There is no problem with giving me more Batman games. The problem with more Batman games is only a problem if you only give me Batman. Take Marvel games as the prime example. You love Spider-Man, beautiful. You've had 3 Spider-Man games, another on the way. He's playable in Ultimate Alliance, Avengers and Marvel Rivals. But if you're not, there's also an Iron Man game coming, Black Panther, Blade, you have your roster heroes. You get the point. They're maximising the IP that they have. Batman sells, I get it. But in 2025, we're about to get a brand new Superman movie to begin a new cinematic universe, and there's not even a sniff of a Superman game in development. I've said my piece in that, yeah, a Superman game is probably the most difficult superhero game to pull off, but surely someone can do it now. Spider-Man's web swinging never felt so good until it did with Insomniac. A Marvel hero shooter couldn't work until it did with Marvel Rivals. There is the possibility that I'm waffling about all this, and there is DC games being made behind the scenes and we're a few years away, but with the way DC has been managed in the last 10 years, I'm highly skeptical of that. The harshest reality of it all is that if they only did start licensing out their IP within the last year, with how long games take to produce and develop now, 4 to 5 years at minimum, you're talking 2028, 2029 at earliest before even thinking about these video games. Which, if everything carries on as it is, that's when the Batman 2 is going to come out, for Christ's sake. Oh, that's part sadness and laughter thinking about that. If we quickly take a stop at speculation station, let's say 2028. On the Marvel side, we'll have had 1943 Rise of Hydra, Wolverine, Iron Man, Black Panther, and we're probably just about to see Spider-Man and Blade release. On the DC side, I'd say we get Wonder Woman and potentially the release of WB Montreal's next game. Probably see something like Rocksteady's likely Batman game in 2029 at the earliest. This is all just speculation, but you can see the contrast here between the two different brands. Look, I don't like Armchair Devon because, as I say, video games are so hard to make. They're more costly than ever, they take longer to produce than ever, there is more moving pieces than ever, and I think, personally, consumer expectations are higher than ever. But it's the way that DC has been so horribly mismanaged in comparison to what Marvel Games is. Marvel Games have rarely found their flow in pairing studio to IP. WB doing similar can help manage the load and pressure that is now placed on Monolith, WB Montreal and Rocksteady. It reminds me a little of Halo in recent years, that's had no spin-off games, just everything is hinged on Halo Studios, who were known as 343. But I really hope DC invests in its video games, because I'm looking at Marvel Rivals right now, and the knock-on effect that is going to have. MCU interest has been waning, but this game drops, and people are crazy for Jetha Landshark. They'll see the maker Mr. Fantastic cosmetic, and they'll be interested by that, and they'll maybe go and read a comic, or they'll go and watch a movie. And I believe that as Gunn tries to get this DC universe firing, video games can have a really strong impact. You think about how Marvel Rivals is already about to synergize with Insomniac Spider-Man and will link with MCU and his cosmetics. Think about how Insomniac adds its movie suits. You look at how people went crazy when Rocksteady finally added the Patterson's Batsuit to Arkham Knight. Synergizing can be so effective that if WB could have a Superman game ready to roll for a Superman 2 or a Justice League film, that could be crazy. I think one of Marvel Games' strong suits is that the MCU doesn't affect its games. I personally believe that DC should take this approach. I know James Gunn has spoke about having video games set in the DCU, but that's fine for the odd game, but I just think it can get very messy with lore and storytelling. But really, that's the worry. I understand that we're about to go through a bit of a dry spell because arguably their two flagship studios have both just shipped their games, both to underwhelming receptions, and you look to the horizon and there's just Wonder Woman, which we still haven't seen in motion despite its very, very high potential. It's worrisome as a big DC fan. When Avengers ended support, I was disappointed, sure, because I did enjoy that game, but I had Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, and all these other games to look forward to. I hope that DC can get to Marvel Games' level, but the reality is more that it's going to take time. I want more Batman, sure, more Arkham, sure, but I want more than just Batman. Give me some weird Martian Manhunter Metroidvania, give me a spiritual sequel to Justice League Heroes, which was akin to Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Not every DC game needs to be a 200 million AAA third-person action game, in the same way that Gunn is going to give us a horror Clayface movie, The Lanterns being a detective show. I'm so excited for Marvel's slate of games. I love the fact that when an MCU show or movie hits, I'll at least have Marvel Rivals to jump into or the other games to help scratch that itch. I love the amount of different heroes that are getting games, And I love the giant roster games of an Ultimate Alliance and Midnight Sun to kind of balance that as well. I hope that DC can get the wheels spinning and give us something similar, but right now it is barren and it's going to take a long time to get going, I think. But that's just how I feel about the state of Marvel and DC games. What do you think? Answer me this. What's the announced superhero game that you're most excited for? What's your dream superhero game that is not currently in development that you would like to see? And what do you think about the difference between Marvel and DC games right now? If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, I'd enjoy you leaving a like, and as I said at the top, if superhero games are your shit, consider subscribing, news, reviews, guides, all that jazz. I'd love for you to stick around. Regardless, all my socials are linked down below. Otherwise, I hope you have a terrific day, play games, get gains, and I'll catch you next one.